as you get familiar and comfortable with your budget, you'll start to want to make decisions with it. So I'll let you see how I went about making certain decisions with my budget. So remember, we have this January budget example. And say if after my 1 month or so of tracking my budget, I said, you know what, I don't really even buy clothes that month, so every month, so I don't really need this $100 every month for clothing. So perhaps in February, I want to zero this out because maybe I only buy clothing when there's an event coming up and actually it's COVID, so I'm not going anywhere and they're only seeing me from the waist up anyway on my Zoom calls. So this is zero. So then now I have an extra 100, well, not even an extra 100. To sum of both checks, I have an extra 250 that I can use for something else. And so I might say something like, all right, well, maybe I can put this to debt because right now with my car note, I'm starting the year off with 17,000 in debt. And right now, if I make only the minimum monthly payments at the end of the year, I'll have 15,000 left. So maybe I want to throw all my extra cash to this car note. And so then I will take the extra money in February and put it towards the car note instead. So I'll increase it by 100 for the first check. So it'll be 350 instead. And then I'll pay an additional 150 for my second check to the car note. And so then now during the month of February, we would have paid 500 to the debt. And as you see here, if we go up to February, you see that 500. So I might do something like that. Another decision making scenario might be if you don't live on your own yet, but you want to, and you want to see, well, how much could I even afford in rent? So for you, your budget right now would have this zero in the rent and mortgage sections, and probably even the electric, unless you're helping pitch in at your parents' house or wherever you may be. So let's see the rest of your budget. So since you're at home, you may not even be paying groceries either. So perhaps this might be zero too. And so then you see that you have a remaining income that you're not using every month in the amount of 1550. So in theory, you have about 1550 that you can spend every month to rent your own place if you wanted to. Now, I always advise that people test out how much they think that they can afford before they actually move out. So you don't want to assume that you can spend 1550 a month on living expenses and find out after you move out that you can't do it. So what you can do, and what I did was, if you think that you can spend that in rent, what you can do is put that aside. So whether it's a savings account that you put that 1550 in every month and see if you can leave it in savings without touching it. That way you know that you can actually put it towards something else. So say for example, if you put 1550 aside every month and you keep finding that you're taking like $200 out of it every month, then that means that you really can only afford 1350 because you keep dipping into that amount of money. Another decision that you might have to make with your budget is a savings goal that has a deadline. So say if you wanted to have $6,000 by the end of the year to use for the down payment for a vehicle, or you want to include it for part of your down payment for a home, and you wanted to know how much you needed to put aside each month to get to that goal. So what I automatically do is just divide my savings goal by the amount of time I have. So if this is January, it's 12 months until December. So 6,000 divided by 12 is $500 a month. You would need to save at least $500 a month to have $6,000 by the end of the year. So $500 a month is $250 per paycheck. So we'll just write here car down payment, and I'll show you what I do with it. So if you need $250 per paycheck to get to that goal, well, right now, before we even try to put that savings goal in, we only have $150 to work with. So that means that I would need to take $100 from somewhere else to get to that $250 savings goal per check, or I would have to somehow find an additional income stream that would give me the extra 100 that I needed to make 250 per check. So for me, I might say I don't really need to get clothing every month because I want to make it to my savings goal by the end of the year. So maybe I might zero this out and then do my 250 per check that way. Or you can move whatever other category around that you want to move around to get to your savings goal. But this lets you see, what do I need to do, what do I need to not spend, or what do I need to save to meet my goals. So you get to plan ahead. So as soon as you get that check, you already know I got to send 350 to savings, the 100 for my Mexico trip, the 250 for my car down payment. Boom. And so that way you're taking care of your goals and you're planning ahead. I'll show you a few other things that I do with my budget. So remember on the podcast when I mentioned that if I make a purchase with my credit card at a store, that I make sure that it's something that I have in savings. So say if I'm in Nordstrom, I see some pants that I want, they're $50. I will open up my Google Drive on my phone, see what I have. Okay, for clothing I have $100 available. So, and I want to use my credit card just to, like I said, have activity on my card. On that Capital One card, I'll put, I was at Nordstrom. Well, for one, okay, well, I'll put I was at Nordstrom. And then I'll put the $50 that I spent. And I usually put the date just for my own purposes. And so then on the clothing portion of my budget, I'll deduct that 50 so that I know I don't have it to spend, and I'll put Capital One. I put TBP, but for me I know that means to be paid. So then I know to myself, not only do I have $50 less to spend on clothing, but that's a note to myself to pay my Capital One when I get home or immediately or whenever. So that's how I make sure that I have the funds to spend in the first place, and also remind myself that it needs to be paid from my own budgeted funds. And yeah, so I keep a record of it that way. So when I actually make the payment on the card, I'll update my tracking tab like this. So say if I paid it when I got home on that same day, I will put paid here. So now that payment's there, and then I would update this description to just say Capital One paid 116. So now it's no longer to be paid, it is paid. Something that I do when it comes to debt is that I will look at the payments. So say for this example, I have that beginning balance of 17,657 at the beginning of the year, and if I make the minimum payments at the end of the year, it will be 15,440. So at the beginning of the year, I might say something like, what if I pay 350 a month to the car note instead of the 250? How will that impact the ending balance at the end of the year? And so in order for me to do that, I would update each monthly tab and then change this to 350 instead of 250, and that will update this sheet, because remember, this sheet is pulling the values from each of the monthly tabs. So I may look at it that way. Another thing I would do is, even if I was going to make the monthly payments, the minimum ones, I might say something like, okay, in April when I get my tax return, say if I got $1,000 back or $3,000 back, if my April payment was 3,250 instead of 250, how would that impact my balance by the end of the year? So I'll play around with different scenarios to make a decision about where I want my money to go to. Or I might say something like, even though I want to go to Mexico by November, what if I use what I would have put towards savings for that trip to my debt instead, because I want to be debt free or whatever by the end of the year. So I'll play around with different scenarios on my monthly tabs to pretty much make decisions that I feel the most comfortable with. So that's why I love this sheet, because you can just play around with so many different scenarios about where your money can go. And it's all up to you. Wherever you decide you want to put your funds, it's fine. One thing to remember is to make sure that you don't forget expenses that don't come monthly. So if you have car insurance that you pay once every 6 months, make sure that you add that expense on this budget spreadsheet, or things like your annual car registration, things that don't come monthly. Just make sure that you include them when you're making your plan for the year so that it doesn't catch you by surprise when that bill comes due.